Hi, everyone. This is Keith Koo, and I'm a parent in the CIPCF, Chinese Immersion Parent Council of Fremont. We're doing a series interviewing all of the D4 and D5 candidates for the Fremont Unified School District's board. Tonight, I'm joined with Julie Fan, president of CIPCF, and Brian Lee, former president of CIPCF. And our guest tonight is Lucy Shen, who is running for D5. Welcome, Lucy. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So CIPCF has a great cross section of students and parents throughout the district. So whether you're in D1 through D5, all of the candidates and all the elections for this current race is relevant to us. So thanks again for being here. Our first question is, we want to get to know you. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Fremont at Washington Hospital. I joke about being like the most local you can get. But I went back and forth between here and Shanghai a lot as a kid because of my dad's job. So that was very much part of, I think it's shaped part of my identity in a way that's made my school experience a little bit unique. So after I graduated from Mission San Jose High School in 2013, I went to Boston for college at Wellesley College. And then I graduated in 2017 and came back to be a software engineer. So I usually in non-pandemic times, I work in Mountain View. And yeah, that's been my job since I graduated, so.
Great. So what motivates you to want to be a trustee?
Yeah, this is, it's obviously there are lots of reasons that go into this decision, but the biggest thing for me was that I started getting involved with the school board in 2018 when the sex ed curriculum came up and there was like kind of a whole thing about it. And what I realized in that experience, I went to one of the meetings just to see what all the fuss was about. And then before I knew it, I got dragged into the entire situation. But I realized in that scramble that we have some really serious communication gaps and generational and cultural gaps in our district. And it was really concerning for me in that experience because I felt like a lot of us, even though we saw eye to eye on so many things, that people were just like at each other's necks the whole time. It was really distressful for me as someone who, was raised by immigrant parents and then seeing people who were a lot like my parents, like they're fighting for what they believed was good for their students and their kids. And then people in my generation showing up or teachers showing up who there was just like so much disagreement, even though we really were starting off and that we agreed about so many things. And so it was concerning to me how that rift happened. So I really want to be able to, I think as an alum, as a daughter of immigrants, as someone who's bilingual in Chinese and English, thanks to immersion programs such as yours, I did those weekend Chinese schools. I feel like I am uniquely positioned to help bridge some of these communication gaps. I think it's really important that our community heals from this. I think we all sort of started off on the wrong foot and we have a lot of work to do to repair those gaps. So I would say that is, I think, what makes me uniquely positioned to help us, help the district. I know for sure from my own experience as a student, honestly, very recently, right? I graduated 7 years ago, so that wasn't even that long. I still remember how frustrating it was as a student whenever I wanted the school or the district to change anything and how it felt like I had nowhere to go to complain. And so in my position, I feel like I could serve as a really good conduit to help convey concerns and thoughts to the school board in a way that like I'm really will be able to speak from your experience. So I don't know, the processes in my experience have not gotten any better. It's just as opaque as before. So I want to work to make the transparency and accountability pieces better for our school district. And I also, obviously, I think anyone who runs is going to say this. Nobody, this is not a desirable job, right? Like it's not a fun job. No one wants to stay up till 3 a.m. every other week. So I think anyone who runs for this position, I have a massive amount of respect because it's really about service to the community and giving back to our community. And that is definitely true for me as well.
Thank you. Well, they do say that school board member is the most thankless political or local position that there is out there. So following up, because we talked about your background, software engineer, and that you are an actual alum of Fremont schools, what other specific experiences do you have, whether it be volunteer or other activities that make you uniquely qualified for this position?
Yeah, so the whole 2018 thing that happened after all of that happened, they created a task force. The school board created a task force, and they appointed people who applied to the task force. This is a pretty common governance practice. I think most of you probably have a lot of experience with the school board. Anytime there's a difficult discussion that needs a lot of community input, it's a common practice, right? So they spun up the task force, and I amazingly was able to be appointed to it, and I served as secretary there. So my job was really just note taker. And that experience really helped me work directly with all kinds of people from the district. That's community members, parents, teachers, current students, all of those viewpoints. I was able to directly engage with them, and that was a really valuable experience for sure. Because through that experience, I learned like how the Brown Act works and what Robert's rules are, which I think are definitely relevant for any committee and curriculum, or rather committee or task force, of which we have many. Shout out to anyone who's watching this. We desperately need people on our district task forces and committees, so please apply. Your viewpoint is very valuable. Beyond that, I've done a lot of volunteering work. I really deeply believe in mentorship. I think it's super important for us to, especially as a woman in tech, it's a very big thing for me. I've mentored for Girls Who Code. I've mentored for a program called Spark, which connects our big tech companies with underserved communities, schools, basically. So we worked with Cesar Chavez in East Palo Alto as Intuit. Sorry, that's a company I work for. I realize I never named them. So Intuit partnered through Spark with Cesar Chavez, and we were able to directly mentor students from there. I've formerly, everyone has their summer jobs as a high schooler. For me, that was working at a summer camp, came back again in college to do that. These are all amazing experiences I've had to work with kids and students of all ages, basically. More recently, I volunteered with Stand Up for Kids, which is a really great, completely volunteer-run organization that it's national, but we have our own Silicon Valley branch, which is based in San Jose. And they work with at-risk and homeless youth in the San Jose area, which honestly means youth all over the area. So that's been a very valuable experience. And thanks to the pandemic, I've had to put that on hold because of my high risk. My dad is high risk, as we were talking before we started recording. So those are all really valuable experiences to me. I think I've always enjoyed working with youth and with kids. So this will be a very different angle to tackle that, but I think it'll be valuable.
Great. Well, thanks for the intro. We're going to switch now into some more challenging questions because it's a challenging election. It's a challenging time for our district. What do you think are the biggest challenges that FUSD faces, and what's your plan to address those?
Yeah, the root of all evil for us is always going to be the budget. But I think that is sort of like the umbrella problem behind all of our problems. So to be a little more specific, I think the first thing that's on everyone's mind right now is COVID. What do we do about COVID? And the COVID discussion has two sides to it. The first part is, well, we're in distance learning right now, and there are a lot of pain points associated with distance learning. So what can we do to serve our students and our parents and our teachers and our staff while we are in the necessity of this distance learning model? And then the other side is, how do we get back to school safely? So those are like the two prongs of the problem that I want to tackle. The first part, the thing that I've heard a lot from a lot of current students and parents, and also teachers, but their complaints are a little different about distance learning, is that the tooling is not unified. So I've heard of so many different tools, like the high schoolers that I speak to, for example, high school freshmen, they have to turn things in on Turnitin, but the assignment came to them through email, and then they have to sign into Zoom to attend their class, but also the calendars track through Google Classroom. So like keeping track of all these different tools. And then you have 6 different teachers in high school, depending on your block schedule or whatever. At Mission, it would be 6 or 7. And each of those teachers has their own system or their set of tools. Teachers have their own websites. Not all of them use School Loop. Like keeping track of all of that as a 14-year-old or even an 18-year-old, I just can't even, like, I could barely do that as a college student. And so unifying tooling, I think, is a really important step that the district hasn't taken yet. And it's causing so much pain for our students and our parents, because our parents, especially for our younger students, are the ones who have to figure all this out and track everything for their kids. And it's just totally unmanageable right now, is what I'm hearing. The worst part of this is that there's no complaint system. So everyone is frustrated out of their minds with the system, and they have nowhere to go. You could email your teacher or your principal or school board members, and then like just pray that they respond to you. There's no formal system where like customer service, right, has customer support tickets that you can track the status of. Something as simple as that, just to know that someone read your complaint even, I think would be really important. So creating, number one, a unified tooling system for all of our teachers and our students and our parents to use, and training for those tooling, because it's easier to train 1 or 2 tools for everybody than it is to train them on 8. And then the second part is to create a more formalized complaints and feedback system. Something that I loved as a college student, I was really privileged. I went to a fancy private school. Our feedback system at the end of every semester was we would write a full feedback form for each of our professors. And I would love to see something like that introduced at our schools in Fremont. So that's huge for me. I'm just seeing a lot of like people feeling like they're yelling at a wall in this distance learning model. And then the second half of that is coming back to school, right? And this is where the budget gets really intense because our HVAC systems are not up to par. The state is like, open windows if you don't have good circulation systems, but a lot of our classrooms don't have windows. We don't have to fund the necessary PPE and cleaning equipment. Like, where's that funding going to come from right now? And also, additionally, testing is something that the state can't even get right. Our counties can't even get right. And we have to scale up with them as a school. We'd have to test everybody all the time because it's not just about our young students who are arguably lower risk, but also the intergenerational, like we're a very multi-ethnic city. We're a very majority minority city. So a lot of our families are multi-generational. Like kids go home to grandpa and grandma, right? Like they could be bringing anything back to their grandparents, and that is not what we want in the middle of a pandemic. So those are the two sides of the COVID situation, I think, that are really crucial right now that haven't been adequately addressed. I think we're doing okay on some points, like providing Chromebooks and hotspots, for example, and also lunches for our students who are free and reduced price lunch, but and not just lunches, multiple meals actually, which is great. But beyond that, we haven't done a whole lot of planning. I would really like to see a more transparent, a more clear system set up than we have right now.
Okay. Well, yes. So that's covering COVID, which we hope is a short term, might be midterm issue. What are some of the longer term structural challenges that you see that you're facing? And we can go back to the budget too, because there definitely is a budget challenge. There's also decreasing enrollment. So what are your thoughts on those areas?
Oh man, that's a lot. Do you want me to tackle the budget first?
You can tackle any order you want.
Okay, let's talk about the budget first then. So we're projected, and the numbers I'm hearing right now, and there's wide fluctuation. The numbers I'm hearing right now are projected 11 million deficit that we have to cut, rather, not quite a deficit. We just have to cut 11 million from our current plan for the next incoming school year, and then another 16 million after that. Which is a lot of money from a district that was already very short on funds. The biggest thing I want to name here, and especially because especially if you have an audience, I want to shout it out right now. And this may be politically contentious, but I personally really support Proposition 15 and things along that vein, right? I think it's a really important step to take for us to come up with more sustainable funding alternatives other than increasing parcel taxes and issuing another educational bond, because all of that directly increases tax burden on us, the individual taxpayer. But currently our large corporations, small businesses, I definitely don't want to hurt right now. They're already having enough trouble as it is. But our large corporations are basically getting away scot-free when it comes to their real estate taxes. And Prop 15 would do a really good job of closing that gap. And the estimation right now is, well, it's again, wide range, but the number I'm seeing a lot is 20 million, that they could provide 20 million to Fremont Unified specifically, which would be huge. 20 million is a lot of money, and it would directly address our current 11 million situation. Well, the money would have to flow in a bit, and it's just an estimation, but no matter what, it's going to account for a lot of our budget issues. And I just, it's like a dream to imagine what we could do with our facilities. The theater, I was a 4-year theater student in high school, so this is very personal to me, but MSJ doesn't have a theater department anymore. Hopkins, with our brilliant Mr. Conway, their band program is at risk of being cut. I can't even imagine that. And being able to fund our arts and athletics again is so important to me. And so honestly, making sure that our companies that exist here and depend on our communities to provide employees and also customers to them These are all, it's a way that they can give back to the community that they're also part of, right? So I think, in my opinion, not just Prop 15, obviously that's only one thing, but things in that, along that vein of trying to make sure that everyone who is part of our community is giving into it a fair amount. And of course, the process has to be transparent, has to be clear what they're paying and why they're paying it and what that money's going to, right? The same is true of parcel taxes. Like, I think a huge reason people don't feel good about parcel taxes right now is because you feel like they're misspending your money. I remember hearing about the MSJ pool situation and how they basically went like way over budget. I don't feel good paying taxes if I know that my taxes are being spent irresponsibly with very bad oversight. But if we are transparent about the system and the community actually gets input, and again, that falls to the committees, and then the district is accurately reporting their spending, and it's easy for us to follow along, even if we don't want to go to a 3 a.m. board meeting, it's easier to feel good about the money that you're giving to our schools. Like, everybody wants our schools to be good and well funded. The problem is when you feel like it's being inefficiently spent. So I guess specifically the more sustainable options I'm proposing, number one is things like Prop 15. And the second thing is, when we talk about developer impact fees, not just the impact fees, but negotiating clearly with those developers what is expected of them. So they're not, so they can look forward to working with us because they know what's expected of them, right? Instead of like changing the demands every time a new developer shows up, and not just collecting money from them, but working with them because they're developers. They can build things. Our district does not specialize in that. So really leveraging those partnerships, I think, will be really valuable to us in solving our crazy budget crisis. What were the other like major challenge? Should I just like jump onto the next thing other than budget? Okay, let's see. I think the next big thing, I've spoken a lot about accountability and transparency. I think a big way we can close that particular gap is one thing for me. I'm a software engineer, so I really love data-driven decisions. I love data dashboards. I love like web pages that surface like data visualization. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of publicly available data that right now the only way you can find it is if you go through our like 300-page long budget projection or something. Like, nobody wants to do that. That's a headache. We were looking at like the city budget, and I was just trying to figure out like where all this money is going. Utterly unparsable, right? It's just hundreds of pages of a PDF, and you just tables that don't make any sense. I really think that building out, investing in creating web pages that can surface some of this data in a searchable format, in a readable format, so that the data can tell a story, because that's the job of why we collect data, is for us to be able to make decisions based on it. And right now it's just sitting there and we don't know anything. So not just for the board members, because I think you'll find that like there are experts that sit there and walk us through as board members what all of these data points mean, but nobody's going to do that for like our parents and our community members. And most of those parents and community members don't have time to show up to every board meeting and hear it explained every time or watch the recording after. It's just not realistic. So I'm not saying we have to do this to all of our data. There's a lot, but I think the most important data points that people are curious about, it's like, for example, I never realized that we actually have a fairly high number of students who qualify for free and reduced price lunch in Fremont. Because I always thought like, oh, Fremont's very affluent. Like, that's probably not the case. And then I realized that I think at an American high, it's like almost 20%. Did not realize that. Had to go through a 300-page long budget document to find that. So yeah, really exposing that data, not just our demographic data, but also our budget information and what we're spending it on. Like, we have so many beautiful pie charts. Let's expose those. You know, let's have a like budget central homepage where we can see everything. It's just easier for everyone. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, I really want to hold, I've been saying this since day one of my campaign, because I wish our board members did this more, but I really want to host regular open office hours where I just, you know, we're all used to Zoom now, thanks to this pandemic. A silver lining is we all learned this tooling. So literally just to sit on Zoom for like 2 hours, I don't know, every Saturday, we'll figure a schedule out, but setting a regular time that people can look forward to, that they can expect, that they can just drop in and say hi, get to know me, and then complain if they have anything on their mind. Or if they have, I feel like our community members have amazing ideas, but I don't know, they don't have anywhere to put them that actually will make them happen, right? And so having open office hours will open up a channel where people can bring me their ideas, because our community is so well educated. We're all so smart, and I want to hear what you all have to say about everything. Most of my ideas for this campaign came from talking to people and asking what they wanted, right? And that's why I know it's a good platform, because people have told me, yes, that's what I want. I think office hours are really important. And I'm hoping that if even one board member starts doing that, that everybody will. And then the burden will be distributed across all of us, hopefully. So that's huge, because emails are intense. They're a good way to asynchronously discuss things, but it can be a very laborious process to go through, I think, especially when you're on the receiving end, which I'm already feeling as a candidate a little bit, but I'm doing my best. So that's sort of like the communication and transparency side. Let's see. Yeah, I think those are probably the two biggest, more structural challenges that we're facing as a district.
Got it. So basically budget, and then data-driven analytics for certain things, and then communication transparency.
Yes.
Are there other goals that you have for your campaign?
Yeah. So the details will be on my website, votelucyshen.com. We've also been posting platform planks pretty much every day on social media. So if you are on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever, if you just look up Vote Lucy Shen, it'll show up. But I'll just go through the top planks really fast, I guess. We've spoken about COVID, we've spoken about accessibility and transparency. So the other, I guess, two things that I want to touch on that are really important that haven't been talked about. The first is mental health, which again is very personal to me as an MSJ student. And also I've heard a lot from Irvington students about this as well. It's not an easy time to go through our Fremont high schools. And due to certain potentially cultural, maybe they're generational gaps, whatever it is, a common thread I hear from a lot of students is that it's difficult to talk to your parents about your mental health issues. That was definitely true for me. I never brought up any of this when I was in high school. It wasn't until I graduated college that I started having open conversations with my parents about it. And that was only because I started receiving a lot more education, self-education. Like I had time after graduating college to go and read up on how mental health works and like how you can better take care of yourself. And none of those things were priorities when I was a high schooler and a college student. I was a really frazzled student. I had a lot of pressures that I would put on myself. Like it wasn't because I had tiger parents or whatever the stereotype is. I just had really high standards for myself. And I would feel like a failure if I didn't reach every single one of those standards, like it was a checklist, you know? And that really weighed on me a lot. And I think it resulted in a lot of issues that I, to this day, still grapple with, among which is anxiety is a huge thing that I deal with still on a day-to-day basis. And so much of that comes from like my own ridiculously high standards that don't make any sense. So those kinds of conversations are really important to have with our students as young as grade school, right? And that can be as simple as a self-care conversation. A lot of our kids, when they have, I don't know, when they throw a tantrum or have other displays of behavioral issues that are essentially a cry for help, I think it's important to inform them to, like mindfulness is the buzzword now, I guess, but to realize what's happening with themselves. And they're young, but I think they get it, right? They understand that like, this is not how they usually behave. They're acting out right now because they feel a certain way, right? So teaching our kids from a really early stage what it means when you're not feeling good, and what action you can take to prevent it from becoming a problem, because I think it's very normal for people to run into all kinds of issues. Growing up is not easy. So as early as possible, if we can equip them, and it doesn't have to be the buzzwords, it can be as simple as like a timeout doesn't have to be a punishment. It can be, hey, just take some time, like calm down, and then we'll come back and we can talk about what just happened, right? Which we definitely did a lot when I was working at a summer camp with grade schoolers. They usually, it's just about learning to control your own behaviors and be in touch with your own mental state. So that is one thing, is sort of like mental health education. The other side of this coin is actually hiring mental health professionals, which we don't have very many of. Actually, we don't have any really. The counselors that we had in high school were guidance counselors. They did college counseling, basically. So their job was to make sure I graduated and got into college if that was my goal, which at Mission would be almost everyone's goal. So it was not their job to deal with my mental breakdown or whatever. Like, it's not their job and they're not trained to handle that, right? So I realize we have budget issues, obviously, like we have just been talking about, and it may not be feasible to have a mental health professional at every school. But again, coming from a software engineering perspective, we really believe in rapid experimentation, right? Try things out. If they don't work, they didn't work. At least we tried it. We know that's not going to work. So let's try something new. We know that what we have right now is not working. So why do we keep doing it? So let's throw something new in the mix, see what happens, right? It could be as small of an investment of like $100,000 to hire a mental health professional to work from the district that could service. Obviously, it's going to be too much of a load for them to handle, but as much as possible, right? Gather the feedback and the data from that experiment. If it's really worth it, then we can justify spending more of our budget investing in that program and really building it out more. So the mental health professionals program, I guess, is something that I would want to build out more. We used to have a social worker program, which got cut in 2014 because of budget issues, and it's always the budget. And hopefully, I think bringing that back would be probably the first step to instating a mental health system for our students. And I think when we talk about mental health, that people focus a lot on high school age kids, because I think that's when a lot of issues bubble up and they become very real, which is not to say that they haven't always been there, right? But I think the earlier we can tackle these problems, the smoother everyone's growth process is going to be. And it'll be better for our students, for our teachers, and our parents, right? When we talk about school safety, for example, oh my God, we have an epidemic of school shootings, which is just, I just can't believe that we've gotten here. And the conversation always comes back to mental health awareness. I mean, there's like the whole gun control debate, and then underneath that is always about mental health. Gun control is not something I have control over as a school board member, and so I'm not going to speak on that. But mental health is something I can do something about. So I think it's our responsibility to, instead of just not doing anything about it, which is what's currently happening, to actually invest some experimentation and some resources into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
D5 has,
Yeah.
thank you for those answers. D5 has several candidates. Did you want to comment in your own way how you differentiate yourselves from the competition?
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not here to like slander my opponents. I actually really respect both of them. They're really great people. I don't know. I think it's amazing that one of them is an incumbent who's been serving for 6 years now, and she's ready to take on another 4. Like, I would be so exhausted. But I think it's valuable. And then also someone like Vivek worked with the MPPFA for so long. He has demonstrated track record. I think we all come from such different backgrounds, and we all have something very valuable to offer for our school district. So I'm really excited to see how things pan out. Who will the community choose? So yeah, I guess the thing I will say about what differentiates me from them, I really think that my perspective as an alumnus is crucial. It's something that we're not having on the school board right now. And not just as an alumnus, but as a recent alumnus, as someone who the student experience is still very fresh in my mind. Not just that, I have gone to college, I've come back, I've worked for 3 years now. I have added context to that student experience, because while you're a student here, I really appreciate our student board member. I'm just gonna start with that. I'm glad we have a student board member position. I'm glad they have a voice on the board. I kind of wish they had more voting power than they do, which is none. They can't vote right now. Their vote is entirely symbolic, but I'm glad they're able to tell us how they would vote. But I think the value of an alumnus is that we have more life experience that has gone on top of that student experience. We're no longer encapsulated in the Fremont bubble. Fremont is very much a bubble. We only really, I mean, our school district is 89% non-white. That's not true of the rest of the country, right? Like, I went to college and it was 25% Asian, and I was like, where did all the Asians go? Because I was surrounded by people who looked like me when I went to high school, and that was just normal for me. It wasn't something I really questioned. I knew it wasn't normal, but I didn't question it every day, right? Like, I was just like, oh, well, this is just how it is. Just those kinds of experiences, and having studied abroad and like done research, and obviously full-time work, and then also having worked with, I think on the parent side, myself, I'm at an age where I'm considering like getting married and having kids. Like, those are all real decisions that I have to be making now in my life. These are all relevant things to help round out that student experience a bit more. And I think it's what makes the alum perspective really valuable. And it just doesn't exist on the board right now. And I would love to see it more. Other than that, I think also being the daughter of Chinese immigrants is crucial. I spoke a bit earlier about wanting to bridge gaps. I think that's where my experience could really, not just experience my identity, my experience, all of it, can really help me connect with people more. I think it's really easy to, let's just say that I had a lot of frustrations with the district administration, with the high school administration when I was a student. Things as simple as like taking certain AP courses before junior year of high school. Like MSJ has all these limitations on what classes you can take and when you can take them and what tests I mean, there's a whole thing about AP testing right now, which definitely understand that frustration. I went through that myself as a student. It's, I think, obviously I don't want to point at administration and be like, you're all racist, which they're not, obviously. But I think that it's really important for us to think critically about how we're managing those restrictions, right? Because I'm going to be very blunt here. I think it is racist to say that a certain middle-class white American experience is normal. Considering that normal and healthy by default, I think is really problematic. I mean, racist is a really strong word, but I think it like is important to think of it from that lens, right? Like how potentially could it be racist when I say, oh, like our students are all stressed out because their parents are Chinese and Indian and they're bringing their home cultures here and stressing their kids out. And that's why our kids have mental health problems, right? Because it totally dismisses all of the other environmental factors. Our teachers, we have amazing teachers at Fremont, but we also have some teachers who are not so amazing. You can just go on, like students are speaking out right now. You can go on social media, go on Instagram, go on Twitter. There are mental health panels that happen every year that are hosted by our students, and students are like, they clearly don't feel very safe speaking out with their names attached right now. So there's a lot of anonymous confessions right now. And so much of that comes down to like things teachers said or did in their classrooms that made students feel unsafe or like they were different and abnormal because of their values or their priorities. And I just don't think that's the right way to go about this problem. Like there's no denying, right, that like, sure, we have a lot of Chinese and Indian parents here, and like some amount of that means that we prioritize education a lot more potentially than like white America is used to. But that doesn't necessarily mean that like every parent is torturing and abusing their child. Like, I don't know. I just really don't like, I realize I'm ranting a little bit here, but it was a very personal experience for me. It was very frustrating to try to talk about these things with our administration and our school officials and feel completely unheard. Like they would just blame my parents. And I'm like, no, like this is 100% from myself. I'm doing this to myself. So I would like it if you didn't blame my parents for this. But I do think that like, that's why it's really important for someone who has had that experience like me and who has parents like mine, who, I mean, my parents have gone through their own trajectory as well. Their opinions on this have all changed too. But having that experience, that's not represented on the school board right now. It's
I'm glad
not
you
really
said that.
represented. Yeah. I don't
It's
see it.
refreshing to hear.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad I was able to let it out here. Thank you for your relaxed
It's fun.
format.
I mean, we're the panelists. We're all, I think we're all immigrant children. But one thing,
themselves.
One thing I wanted to follow up on is we've heard a lot from you and candidates in other districts about the usually it's either the student experience or the teacher experience, and you've referenced your own parents. Where do the parents fit in this? In that, yeah, because you focused a lot on the students, and you haven't focused as much on teachers. But where do the parents fit in? And it could be, as you said, a cultural identity where also being the son of immigrant parents, that they don't normally speak up, or they don't actually normally know how to navigate the American school system. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, it's a unique immigrant child experience where you have to proofread your dad's emails, right? Yeah, I think the most amazing thing about our parents is that they, despite many of them in this district not even speaking English as a first language, that they would show up to our board meetings and make their statements in English, even if it's uncomfortable for them. Like public speaking is already so stressful, and they do it in a language that they're not comfortable in, right? It just only makes it harder, which to me speaks to how passionate they are about being involved in their students' education. And I think that's amazing. I think it's really great that we have so many parents that are always willing to turn out. But I also think it's important to recognize that a lot of parents don't have that kind of time or energy or bandwidth or connections potentially, because a lot of times when it comes to showing up at board meetings, it involves like you have to know the right people who can tell you how to, because the system is so opaque. Like the first time you go to a board meeting, you don't even know how you're supposed to make public comment. It's gotten a little easier now thanks to Zoom, but before it was chaos. You would show up and there'd be like 2 different kinds of public speaking cards, and then you're like, I don't know, like, which one am I supposed to fill out? You fill out the wrong one, they don't really let you speak, you know, and then you're like, oh, but I thought, like, I'm here to, like, can't I just talk for 3 minutes? Why is it such a big deal? It's just a really frustrating experience. So mad respect to our immigrant parents who show up and really, really fight the good fight. I appreciate their involvement, and I think it makes a big difference.
So back to it's great that you have that perspective. How do you make their voices heard? 'Cause I think
Yes.
that's the thing, is
Yeah.
that they feel like their voices aren't being
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah, it's tricky. Oh man. I think so much of it is like communicating to them in a regular, in a transparent, in an accessible way. Right now, the only way you can get information from the school board is if you like know people who are organizers, who attend these meetings themselves, like people who are able to invest just immense amounts of energy and time into attending these meetings, taking notes, coming back to their like group chat or whatever, and like sharing it with everyone, right? If you're not looped in on those conversations, you don't know anything that's happening. Or like if you're not part of the right email list, right? It's really hard to get in on that entire communication system. So I think it's really important for the school board to try to meet people where they are a lot more. For example, it would not be that hard for like WeChat has like 公众号, right? Like if you could, I don't know how that translates actually, but I guess it's kind of like a feed. If we even post it, we do regular Twitter updates. We have really good Twitter updates. The Twitter updates from the school board, like nobody looks at them, but they're really good. I might be the only person who's there like liking every tweet, but they'll tweet the minutes, the agenda, summaries. Sometimes they'll tweet big things that are happening, events that are happening. And I'm on Twitter, so I get to see them. But people who are not on Twitter may not. Like most of current high schoolers are on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. Like they're not going to see these things because they're not on Twitter. Facebook is another big one, right? I think it, as much as like use social media more, is a very kind of a cop-out answer in lots of cases. I think it's a really practical one for our school board to try, and the point is to reach your people where they are. And if they're on WeChat or Telegram or Nextdoor, right, then you post there. Like that's it's just so basic to me. Like if it's not valuable, then you stop doing it, right? Like nobody's interacting on Twitter, okay, then maybe you don't have to focus on that as much. But I just think it's such an easy step we could take to meet people where they are. I also think, I mean, I think we're all tired of email newsletters. But the district currently, as far as I know, doesn't really do a comprehensive newsletter. It's why people don't really know about like committee openings, for example. We have so many committee openings. It is so hard to fill these committees. And we have so many parents who are clearly willing to invest time and energy into being part of the conversation. So I would love to see those parents on these committees, but they don't even know about it, even though they're this involved with the district, right? So something as simple as a newsletter, as posting regularly on social media, reaching our parents on WeChat. I know it's a little intimidating if you're not Chinese speaking, but well, perhaps that speaks to lack of staff who represent our district, which is a whole other conversation. But I think these are all really important. I think as long as the intention is there to actively reach out rather than expecting people to come and find you where you are, which is, I mean, you should try harder than that. I think those are really basic steps we can take to improve things. And I think also that the community members know what they want. And so being more open to their suggestions instead of waiting for something to break and then everyone comes to complain. So being more proactive about the entire process, I think is really valuable, and it's not happening right now.
Thank you. So switching topics, and it's a topic that comes up often when MIP has discussions. It's the equity question.
Mm-hmm.
And so what does equity in education mean to you? And what do you think the understanding is how equity works in FUSD?
Yeah. Equity is a really loaded word. It means a lot of things, but to me, it's really as simple as just like making sure that people who don't have access to certain opportunities get access to those opportunities. Like when we make something available to our students, that it should hopefully be available to all students, right? And I think the problem that we often hit with this district is that sometimes it seems to, this is probably not the intention, but I think the way decisions are made and the way it reads after the decisions are implemented is that it feels like we're trying to squash our best high achieving students instead of raising our students who need support, right? So I think for me, equity is about raising people rather than smooshing people down. So for example, a huge part of I didn't actually talk about this for the budget thing. I realized that was a mistake. I will mention it now. I think that our students have Fremont especially has a really wide range of like achievement and learning styles and capabilities and whatnot. And also a really wide range of like socioeconomic situations, right? Which is good. Diversity like that is good. But I think that not only do we have to provide opportunities to students who are struggling, who perhaps come from families from less privileged backgrounds, but we also need to stop holding back our students who, like, for example, I had one of my best friends from high school. They really wanted to skip a grade. This was a huge thing for them. They are incredibly high achieving. To this day, I look up to them as one of the smartest people I know. They are just like truly a genius, you know, like a world-class genius. um, no matter what they did, no matter what they said at the school board, no matter what evidence they provided of their, you know, exceptional achievement or whatever, the school district and the high school administration was hell-bent on not letting them skip a grade. I just don't understand. Like, I cannot justify decisions like that. I don't understand why it's so important to them. I mean, maybe if they were more transparent about it, if they gave me an actual reason, then I could respect it, right? Like, oh, I don't know, the next grade level is literally too impacted. We literally do not have room for you. Then I guess I can't say anything about that. Maybe maybe this is where I leave the school district, right? Because it just can't accommodate my needs, which is not what we want because we already have declining enrollment. We want to keep our students. So I really think it's our job as the school district is to serve our students, and they should not feel like they're being restricted or held back, which definitely something I personally felt too, right? I mentioned at MSJ, we don't get to take AP classes until junior year, for example. Why? I asked that question so many times. I never got a satisfactory answer. I'm hoping maybe as a candidate, as a board member, that people will start giving me more straightforward and honest answers, but I still don't have a good answer for that question. I mean, as simple as like, I wanted to take, like, we have AP World History, but we also have a World History class in sophomore year. Like, why is it so important that I don't get to take AP World History until I'm basically a senior? Like, why is that restriction? I don't know. I just have like,
yeah, it's an attitude from them that they know better than the families themselves.
That's how it reads, right? And I'm hoping that's not the intention, but I think that's what we take away from it. I think that's not what they want to be doing to. I think the administration probably thinks they're not talking down to us and being condescending. But to be 100% honest, that is what I felt. I felt like I was being talked down to the whole time. And I mean, it's been 7 years since I graduated. I hope it's at least marginally gotten better, but from the complaints I'm hearing from parents right now, I'm not sure that that's the case. So I honestly feel like every time I bring up a lot of critical issues, like for example, the AP exam issue, I've had a lot of deep conversations with administration, with parents, with students about it. And it really comes down to like COVID restrictions, right? And like facility problems. And I think if you are transparent about that people understand, like, we're in a really crazy time right now. It's not ideal, but we all have to work with what we have and the uncertainty that we have. And I just wish that they would give us a straight answer that made sense. And that was not my experience when I was in high school. And I really want to be able to change that. Hopefully as a board member, that's something I'd be able to do.
Thank you. And another way that equity manifests, especially with a program like MIP, or if we even talk about Hopkins, which has a zero period, and the zero period was originally instituted for band so they could actually take the elective. And then for MIP, and Spanish dual immersion actually was a year before MIP. I was on the committee and the task force to get that started. That has been annually comes up for axing as an extra program that's unique to Hopkins. This is just an example. And what normally happens is there's the discussion or debate between the board members between other unique programs that already exist in other schools throughout the district. So why is it that this particular one is the one that comes up for chopping each time? And why I bring that up was because you said you did theater. there was an instance several years ago where Washington needed a retrofit, and they were granted a $3 million upgrade for their theater, and
Yeah.
yet the zero period costs like $40,000 or $50,000 a year. So those are some of the really, really things that drive parents nuts.
Yeah.
Because you're using equity on both sides, but it's not equal.
Yeah. And the thing that frustrates me is that I think these conversations, like, I don't know, I agree that they come across in a way that's like, when we consider like equity does not mean equal, right? Like, it does not mean that every single school has the identical programs and course requirements and whatnot. Like, it's important to recognize that our student bodies across all of our campuses are unique. I mean, there are some of the reasons for that are not so good. Some of the reasons are great, right? Because we just have a diverse population. That's just how it is. So a lot of when it comes to these specialized programs, I think it's important to have that, because it is infeasible for every school to have every program. It's great that we're able to specialize certain campuses for certain purposes. And then the important part is making those programs accessible across our campuses, right? So for example, MSJ doesn't have a theater program anymore. I'm still heartbroken about that. Irvington has a great arts magnet program. If I were able to participate in Irvington's theater when I was when I was in high school, it was the death throes of our theater. I was in the final years of it. I watched it die, basically. Well, I watched it almost die, and then my underclassmen watched it actually die, which was unfortunate. But in their shoes now, if I had had the opportunity to participate in Irvington's theater program instead, what a valuable learning experience that would have been. Irvington's not even that far off, right? And I recognize that a huge part of our equity issues when it comes to underprivileged students who don't have a high socioeconomic status is that, like, they don't always have a parent who can chauffeur them around, or they don't have a car that they drive, right? Which, as someone who came from a very affluent background, I realized that it's a privilege that I was able to do those things. But like that's where you solve for the equity issue. You don't remove the theater program, you make it so that everyone can join the amazing theater program that you've spun up, right? That is the angle at which I want to tackle equity issues. And I know obviously I'm speaking like a dreamer, it's very idealistic, but I think the intention matters. And I think as long as we think at that angle, to raise up those who are less privileged instead of taking down people who are not, who are privileged rather, that is just going to be a healthier conversation for everyone and a more productive conversation, because I think everyone can get behind that. I think that resonates with everyone.
Thank you. On to continue on sensitive topics. Do you have a position on the SRO situation?
Ooh, oh man, this is the one that is the most sensitive that's come up, I think. Yeah, thanks to your open format, I can actually say whatever I want here, which is usually it's only 2 minutes. The thing I want to start with is that this is not like reevaluating SROs or whatnot. It's not about like attacking our police force, right? Like, it's not about being like, you, because you're a police officer, you are bad, right? Like, it's not about that. For me, it's 100% about, like I mentioned earlier, I believe in rapid experimentation. I believe in trying things if certain things aren't working. Some of the numbers I'm seeing from the SRO program are a little concerning to me. I think it's concerning that, like, oh man, this was this is the worst metric for me when I saw it. And this was in the presentation from, I think, about a month ago. The school district had a presentation to the school board about the SRO program, the costs, the numbers. One of the numbers that concerned me was that around half of our arrests and referrals are Hispanic students, but only 15% of our student body is Hispanic. And I think, like, obviously there are lots of reasons for that potentially, but no matter what, it's a symptom of a serious problem. And it's a problem that I am not convinced that an SRO program can solve, right? Because a police officer's job is to respond when something bad happens. Ideally, as a school board member, I would like to think in ways that are more proactive than that. I'd like to solve the root causes of issues rather than respond to issues as they happen. I recognize 100% that safety is super important to everyone. I think our students and our parents want to feel safe. When you send your kids to school, you don't want to like worry that a school shooter could literally murder them, which unfortunately is the reality of going to school in America, which is just tragic. But obviously we don't want anyone to feel that way. And so if we can arrive at a solution that is safe and try something new, because we've had this program forever. It started in, like, what was it, the 80s, the 90s with the DARE program. If anyone remembers the DARE program, because I was raised on that.
We had DARE when I was in high school. So
yeah, exactly. DARE was a mess. DARE did not accomplish basically anything. So they cut DARE. And the reason we have the SRO program is because of DARE, actually. It like was created alongside it as they were supposed to be like work hand in hand. So one of my questions is, if DARE didn't work and we cut DARE, why aren't we trying something new with the SRO program, right? Like, I'm not saying get rid of all cops forever immediately, but I just think it's time to try something new. It's been a long time. It's a really expensive program. We have budget issues. So wherever we can be creative about this, which is the current task force's job. I think it'll be really important, again, to be data-driven in this decision and to try things in as safe a way as possible. So all of the roles, like SROs serve really important roles right now. And that includes things like mentorship and like being a first responder in an emergency, security for certain larger events. Like, these are all roles that have to be filled still. So I think the question to answer here is there a way in which we can provide safety and security for our students and teachers and parents and staff that doesn't cost us over $800,000 a year, because the projection went up for next year, and still is able to fill all those needs? I think the answer is yes. I think that's why this committee exists. And I'm really excited. I mean, if I were elected, I definitely would, like, the most important thing to me is what this committee finds. I think that should be true of most of our committees, because the whole point is for the community to weigh in. So whatever they find, the data, the ideas, the proposals, I think that is the most important thing to look at as a board member after that. And if they come back to me and they're like, oh, that like SROs are actually the most efficient way for us to do this, then I want to see the data to back that up. And if it does, then all right, like, for me, it's really just about being data driven and just practical and keeping in mind all of like why we're doing things, right? So
yeah, I guess the question would be, if it didn't work and we needed to bring them back, what would the startup costs be to reestablish the program?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, it wouldn't be a cold start, because we do have existing, like everything that we have right now, hopefully should be able to be brought back. But yeah, I hope that's a question that they'll address as well. Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting point.
I have an operations background, so it's always, you can, turning things off is easier than turning things back on. You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
So then another question, and we did have questions prepared in advance from some of your constituents.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an inherent conflict of interest to be endorsed by the teachers union if you're bargaining with the teachers union?
I love this question. So I personally don't think so. My favorite thing about being endorsed by unions is that it's basically just a collective of people, right? Like, their political action fund comes from the individual members wanting to contribute to it. So I think it's really, to me, it's a group of individuals. I understand that to a lot of people, it feels like a very opaque, perhaps nefarious bargaining entity. And I do understand where that sentiment comes from, right? Because a lot of the bargaining process is by law not accessible to the public. I think we need a little more flexibility there, but that's definitely a topic I would want to grapple with if elected. Even if not elected, honestly, as an advocate, I think community members can speak to that and talk to the bargaining committee themselves. But I think it's important for me to be endorsed by the teachers union, and I'm really proud of it, actually, because I think it's important to signal that you are here to work and collaborate, and to know that you have the backing. I don't know. I really didn't expect it, first of all, because looking at trends of endorsements from especially labor unions is they often like to go with safe options, people they have experience working with. And Michelle's really good at her job, right? So I was 100% expecting them to go with Trustee Burke. And when they dual endorse, I was just overjoyed, because to me, it was such a strong symbol that I had a great place, great jumping off point with our teachers in our district, that we're really starting off on the right foot. And that if a difficult conversation has to happen, I would like to think that endorsement means that we can come to the bargaining table and assume best intentions. I know it's really hard to assume best intentions. I've been called naive for saying it, but I genuinely believe that assuming best intentions is how we get things done. Because a lot of times what I see is people agree on a lot of things and disagree on like one small technicality, and then before you know it, they're like fighting each other, which is just unproductive. So wherever we can establish common ground and work together, I think is really important. And so endorsements for me are a really key signal of that. So I was really proud to be endorsed by the teachers union, even if it was dual. I guess it means they're looking forward to working with both of us, I hope. Yeah, it was definitely, I don't think I expected as much monetary support as I got. For full transparency, right? You can look this up in spending reports. I got $3,000 from the teachers union, which is huge. I honestly can't say that I expected that. It's tricky because the startup costs of a campaign are huge, and $3,000 made a huge difference for like sending out that first mailer, right? So it was valuable. It actually made a really big difference in my campaign finance, and I'm not going to give that money back. But I can understand why people would be concerned about such a large sum of money, basically coming from what they see as like an established organization entity.
And there's a follow-up question from the audience, which is, why would the union endorse 2 candidates versus 1? You might not know why, but that was
Yeah, well, to be fair, I never straight up asked them why. I'm not sure that I would get a clear answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really know. I didn't expect it for sure. I don't think anyone expected that. But the dual endorsement, that was true of the teachers union. It was also true of the larger Alameda Labor Council, also dual endorsed us. So it's curious. I've never been part of a labor union's pack, so I don't know what goes into that decision. I am told that it's not very common, so I'm not sure what's happening there. Yeah.
So this is the first time we're doing a district election versus a general election for the city of Fremont and the school board. And so your constituents specifically in the mission attendance area would like to know, and you've probably had this question before, that when it comes to specific issues in the attendance area and it's, characterized as something that they cannot have, what would be the way you handle that situation?
Wait, what situation? Sorry.
So if it came up to a decision that affects specifically the mission attendance area, and I can bring up zero period again, but something to that effect where it's going to only affect mission and may be perceived as detrimental to the mission district, and you're on a board of other board members, how would you address the mission specific issue with the parents are raising?
Oh, yeah, I understand this is necessarily hypothetical. So there are necessarily a lot of hypothetical factors that would go into this. But I guess it would really depend on exactly what it is. If it were as clear cut as like, if we reestablish, I don't know, but if we reestablish the Irvington, let's invest in the Irvington mental health system. And because of that, like very clearly MSJ doesn't get to have a theater for another year. Let's say, for example, I don't think the trade-offs are usually that clear. Like, I don't think it's that much of a zero-sum game, generally speaking. When it comes to making budget decisions, it's almost always like, it's basically ranked choice, right? It's like, what are our priorities right now? What is the most urgent and the most important, and will have the most impact, positive impact, and also considering opportunity costs of the negative impact as well. The trade-offs are usually not that clear. So, I mean, if it ever were that clear, I think we could have a much more obvious conversation about it, but as a pure hypothetical, it's really hard to speak on it, I guess. All I want to say is that if there really were, like, if there were clear detriments to the MSJ population, and not just MSJ, right? I speak for all of the schools as a board. I realize I represent this district, but every board member is accountable to the whole district. So if there's anything that's seen as detrimental to any campus or to any like subset of our population, I would voice that, right? If you notice it, you should say it out loud. Nothing should go unsaid for sure when it comes to making important decisions for a district. So, I mean, I guess the best thing I can say here is that I'm happy to advocate for whoever feels like they're being essentially slighted. Yeah.
So, Lucy, we're at the end of our prepared questions. Was there anything you wanted to end tonight with?
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time for a whole hour. Thanks for basically letting me rant. This has been really liberating for me. It was really fun. I just want to, I guess, give a closing statement of sorts. So I believe that during this pandemic, it's been a really tough time. We're going through a lot of changes in this campaign system as well, right? It's our first time doing district elections. It's our first time going fully remote for an entire campaign. I'm not even canvassing, right? I'm not knocking on doors because I don't want to freak people out. And it's really hard for the whole district to be able to keep up with like the newest remote learning update and like, do we finally have hotspots for our students? No, why? Like, why can't I sign up my kid for AP macroeconomics? These are all just like, there's so much going on. There's a lot of noise, but it's really my job as a future board member, optimistically, to help be your conduit of communication, to establish that channel, and help you have an actual back and forth between the district and you as a parent, as a student, as a teacher, whoever you may be. So my vision for our district is where we're united and we're not divided, and we're working together towards one common goal, which for all of us, I think is the best education possible that we can provide for our students. So I guess all I can say is that our campaign is powered by current students. It's powered by Mission and Irvington alums. And for me, and for all of us, this campaign is really a love letter from us and to the parents and teachers that raised us, to the generations of students that will come after us. And I'm really proud because of this to be endorsed by Vice Mayor Anu Natarajan, former MPPFA co-president Monica Melville, some former school board student members, and I would also be honored to earn your vote subsequently. You can learn more about my platform and my experience at votelucyshen.com. Again, I'm Vote Lucy Shen on all social media. And yeah, that's basically it. Thanks so much for giving me a platform tonight.
Well, Lucy, thank you so much for being here with us tonight on behalf of the Chinese Immersion Parent Council of Fremont. And you can find us, for anyone interested in Mandarin Immersion, at cipcf.org. Julie Fan, our current president, and Brian Lee, our former president, thank you again for joining us, and thank you for all the attendees that were here with us tonight. And we will have 2 more sessions with D5 candidates. That will be Michelle Burke and Vivek Prasad. So we thank you again for being here, and have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
And best of luck.
Thank you.